If you're watching this video, you're probably wondering how to turn your footage from this to this. Stick around and I'm going to show you just how to do that. Picture this. You go home after hitting your fastest lap on your favorite downhill trail, you go to show your grandma, and it looks like you were barely even trying to go fast. Kind of like this. And now you're stuck living in the basement forever. What you're noticing is mainly due to motion blur. Your modern day action camera, like this GoPro Hero 11 I have here, naturally likes to capture the highest level of detail possible. Now, that's great if you're filming a nature documentary. Using a few tricks with the GoPro, the lighting, and the conditions around you, we can actually create the sense of speed. Now we can do this using motion blur. Motion blur is going to look exactly how it felt. So it's going to look as fast as you felt when you were going down that trail. So when you go to show your grandma, you might just be allowed out of the basement. No promises. First, we'll dive into your GoPro settings to maximize the possibility of creating this motion blur while keeping your stability. Next, we'll talk about the conditions you need to be in to create these shots. We'll also dive into what extra hardware you might need. I'll talk about some pros and some cons of recording this way and capturing this kind of footage, because as you can imagine, there are going to be some trade-offs. And if all of this sounds good to you, maybe you can go out, capture some sick footage. Let's talk about your GoPro settings. You're going to want to use a few different types of settings to play around with here. As far as your resolution and FPS, you're going to want to switch between 4K, 24 frames per second, and 5.3K, 24 frames per second. The reason for that is Super View and Hyper View can only be toggled at certain resolutions. Hyper Smooth, we keep that on. You're going to want to keep your 10-bit color on, your bitrate high, and most importantly, your shutter speed. Since we're using 24 frames per second, we're going to double our shutter speed from our frames per second to 1/48. That is one of the most important initial keys to creating motion blur. White balance, keep it how you normally like it. I like mine at 5500 Kelvin. Your ISO is also important. Keeping your min and max to roughly around 100. I like to keep mine to 1 to 200 just to create a little bit of variance depending on the conditions I'm in. Recommendations I've seen online have mostly been to keep it right around 100. Sharpness, keep it low. Your color, completely up to your preference on that one. Some people like GoPro color. I like natural, so I can color grade a little bit, but not too much. And that's really everything for your GoPro settings. So main takeaways here are going to be your shutter speed and your FPS and resolution. And of course, if you want to use between Super View and Hyper View. Let's talk conditions and lighting. Ideally, you'll get the most out of these shots in really well-lit areas without much shade. The tighter the trail, the better. If there are trees or hills close on each side, it really amplifies more areas where you can see the motion blur as you pass those things. Going fast helps, but even without going full send, these settings and conditions will create the sensation of speed. Let's talk about the less than ideal conditions. As you can imagine, these settings won't always work for you. As you may have already noticed, stability is a sacrifice when using these settings. GoPro stability thrives off of well-lit areas, so keeping our ISO and shutter speed low, and even adding in ND filters, can really make for some shaky footage. Dimly lit areas, or straight up dark spots, can completely wash out some footage. For this, you'll recall I mentioned ND filters. Let's talk about them. ND filters, or neutral density filters, are another key tool in creating motion blur. For all the footage you've seen today, I was using an ND16 filter. The gradient of darkness can be increased or decreased with different ND filters. For example, an ND32 would make things even darker for those extremely bright areas, whereas an ND8 filter would reduce that darkness for those really dark spots that we talked about earlier. There will be sacrifices when recording like this, just know that going into it. But at the end of it all, you can get some really sick, fast clips. If you've made it this far in the video, enjoy the next few minutes of pure speed. I don't really make guides or tutorials, so I know I must have missed a few things that may be on your mind. Let me know down below in the comments what questions you have and I'll answer every single one. This is just a really small tip that I really had to share. I can see this being very useful and beneficial for the riders that race, and also anyone looking to spice up gravel or road riding footage. And just let me know, do you prefer just good old-fashioned clean footage that doesn't sacrifice any detail instead? I'll throw this first clip in here so you guys can see what that looks like. And so that you know, I was actually moving pretty quick and it's not all camera tricks. Enjoy. Doing? How you doing, bud? Thank you.